Last week, HP and I were on vacation in Japan for a week, and prior to the trip, we made sure to have the fleet prepped and ready to go so our employee Michael could manage the cars with no issues.
But of course, nothing ever goes to plan, and all of our cars decided to break right when we left out of the country. One of the issues we've had while we've been gone is our Black Escape developed misfire, and it's been really choppy at idle. So we have a stored code for cylinder 3 misfire and another pending one. So when we start up the vehicle, it runs, but it's a little choppy. So it's actually not misfiring too bad right now. I know under idle it's fine, but when you give a little RPM, a little gas, it starts to actually chop out and it starts shooting a flashing check engine light, which means the car is misfiring. A little bit of gas smell coming out of the exhaust because one of the cylinders is not appropriately burning all the gas, it's misfiring. So this is one of the reasons why I don't like V6 engines for cars that are going in your car sharing fleet, is that when you go to work on them, you have 2 additional cylinders to work on versus a 4-cylinder vehicle, and usually the issues that you have them on are the most hard to reach ones, like in this case. So here you can see we have 3 spark plugs here because it's a V6, so we have 3 of them here and then 3 of them in the very back of this engine underneath all this junk. And we can't actually see it, but it's actually right underneath this little area back here, which means that we have to disconnect all of this stuff, remove all of this stuff, throw it to the side to be able to access that one coil. And here's the problem, is that we just know it's misfiring. We don't actually know what the issue is. Could be an injector, it could be the spark plug, or it could be the coil pack. I'm hoping it's the last 2, because those are probably the cheapest and easiest to replace, and it's just not going to be fun getting back there. Now compared to a 4-cylinder car where, like this Toyota Yaris, actually has them boop, 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 boop. It's actually held down by 4 bolts to take this cover off and then 1 bolt to remove the coil. So 4 cylinders are always going to be easier to work on because they have 2 less cylinders, which is 2 less pistons to deal with. Less cylinders, less problems is what I say. But here we are. Now, when we bought this car, we actually bought this is one of our first Turo cars, and it was a V6, and I knew it was gonna be a headache, but when we bought it, it had all the stuff already done. New spark plugs, transmission had been worked over, and that was about 130,000 miles ago, because now I think as this car sits, it has 260,000 miles, which is crazy to think that this car has lasted this long, but it's actually one of our top performers when it's not misfiring. And since then, this car actually already has a new set of spark plugs and coil packs, which just means that whatever went bad just went faulty on its own. It's not due to lack of maintenance. So now we got to get in here and figure out what the issue is. 5/16. Who does that? Okay, I definitely didn't just cry off a camera, but we got the coil out. Now, typically what you can do is you can take, if you want to know if your coil's bad, you take the bad one or the supposed bad one and you swap it around with an easier one. That way you can just see, okay, if I start the vehicle back up, is it going to start misfiring on this cylinder? Does the misfire travel whenever I move the coil over? And we can't do it this time, mainly because this entire process I had to put back together and hope that it was the coil and not the spark plug. So since I'm in here, I'm just gonna replace a spark plug and a coil. No point in wasting time.
The next day.
Now, moment of truth. Let's start it up and let's see if it misfires. Smooth like a kitten, purring on my lap because it loves me.
Mama is a cat, purring in my lap because it loves me.
We have normal idle. We have something clicking. Well, you know what they say, give it a little couple revs. Sounds good. Now let's check our OBD2 scanner and see if we have any new codes. No new codes. Let's make sure we don't have any pending codes. Oh, we're Gucci. Now all that's left to do is to wash, vacuum, clean this car out, and get it right back on a Turo to make some more money. Let's go look at the other cars that need attention. So back at the lot, let's take a look at the other cars that are now broken. That one's fixed. The white Mercedes, broken, and so is the silver Mazda in the back there. The transmission control module went out on that car. I got a new one. That one's not working, so I had to send that one back and we're waiting on the new one. Let's talk about this Mercedes. It was out on an extended rental and the alternator stopped alternating. And unfortunately the alternator is not easy to get to because it's way down there, which means all that junk probably has to come off. And the worst part, the battery's flat dead. So let's yank this battery out, get it back home, put it on the charger, and hopefully we can get this car back to the house. Doink. Just tuck those back in there. You come with me. Negative. Oops, did that wrong. Positive first, then negative. And boop. This is a standard flooded battery. Let's pop that over to 10 amps. And it's dead. So we're gonna let that charge up overnight. That way it's fully juiced up and I can get the Mercedes to here so I can remove the alternator and have all the access to my tools. I'm not doing that on concrete. And speaking of cars that have been on extended rentals, unfortunately, this Ford Focus just got back from, I'm gonna guess, at least a 4-month trip. Let me check my documents. Check the documents. Since December, actually, this car's been out, so about 2.5 months, and it's due for an oil change. So let's get that knocked out in the meantime. Now I'm not being a baby, but this oil is way too hot for me to get the oil filter off. I'm gonna have to wait in the morning time. So, morning time in 3, 2, 1, bonk. It's 6 a.m. in the morning. Sort of. Okay, so now with the oil change and the surprise front brake job done, now we can move on to the second part of our video where I try to fix the Mercedes. Now that our battery is 100% charged, we can throw it in the Mercedes, and hopefully this is enough power to start the Mercedes and get it here without the alternator draining this battery dead dry. All right, so now that we got the battery in after being charged, can put this back on there. Give it a couple blips. Nice. And let's get going before it runs out. Oh, there it goes. It's broken. So typically, if you can hear the alternator whining, it's usually due to a bad bearing in the alternator. However, if the alternator bearing goes so bad out, the shaft of the alternator starts moving around, it makes contact on the inside and it starts touching electrical components that should not be touching. That's typically what shorts out your alternator. And right now we are just operating alone on battery power. So a lot of the times whenever your battery light comes on and your car dies, it's because your alternator stopped producing enough power to fill your battery back up and keep your car running and all the other electronic components in your car that it needs, like spark and whatnot. And if your car keeps running and your charging light is on, typically it might even be your battery going bad. It just really depends on case-by-case basis. Now Now when it comes to this alternator being down here, I don't know that I can get it out any other way except for right here. So that means I usually have to remove a lot of this stuff. However, when looking at it, I may be able to sneak it over here and get it past this hose and past this right here. I don't know, I'm just theorizing, and I'm really just being hopeful because removing a lot of that stuff right there means that I could break a lot of clips, tabs, and stuff that just hasn't been moved in a long time, and it's the last thing I want to do is make more work for myself. All right, new alternator. Let's see what we're looking at. Much like the other Mercedes when I did it, looks like we got 2 bolts bolted to the motor, and then 1 ground strap, power strap on the back, and then 1 signal wire. Super. There's no reason you should have to play twister when it comes to getting things out, especially alternators. Okay, the alternator is loose. It's free. Ah!